Good morning. Welcome to Hometown Heroes. Uh, my co-host Mary Staffeld and I are really excited to have our guest Karalyn Martin, United States Marine veteran and a veterans advocate and the reigning Miss Veteran Select. Is it Veteran Select?
America Select Veteran.
America Select Veteran. So, welcome to Hometown Heroes, Kara.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me this morning.
Well, you're welcome. And you are a United States Marine veteran who joined when you were 17 years old.
Yes.
That's pretty young.
Yes, it was.
What caused you to want to join the Marines?
I had a pretty bad childhood and different levels and extensions of abuse and not having stability and structure. So I graduated high school in 3 years with the help of a dear friend of mine who we're still friends today. Just how do I survive my situation and make it out of here? So given my circumstances at the time, I decided that the military would be the best. I did still have to have my parents sign. So I don't know whether it was a joke or not, but at the time my dad was like, I'm only signing for the Marine Corps. For me personally, it was the first recruiter that called back and also the only branch at the time that didn't require you to cut your hair. And I was nervous. I didn't want to my hair was really long and I didn't know it was important to me. So I really just needed to leave where I was at the time. And ultimately I was homeless. So I needed to just have stability. And I felt like that was going to be my only way to survive. So the Marine Corps is where I went.
So the Marine Corps gave you some stability, but it gave you a lot of discipline too, didn't it?
Yes, it did. A lot of discipline, a lot of stability. I mean, unknowingly, I had already developed the other things I needed, I guess, to survive my circumstances. But it definitely opened up my eyes to a whole new world and possibilities out there, based on what I knew.
You grew up quick and had a whole new family.
Yes, I
Yeah.
did.
So where did you go to basic? Where the Marine women go to basic?
At the time, it was Parris Island, South Carolina.
Okay.
That was 4th Battalion. It's since been unfortunately decommissioned, but at the time, that's where all females were trained in Parris Island, South Carolina.
Okay. And then after you did basic, you went to your advanced training?
So I went to Marine combat training. Everybody goes through, as long as you're not a grunt. And again, at the time, women weren't in groundside MOSs, but we went to Marine combat training in North Carolina. So I came home for 10 days and then went to North Carolina. From there, they sent us to our job training schools, which mine was twofold, being in aviation. And so I was in Pensacola, Florida for almost a year, and then out at Coronado Island, California.
Pensacola is a pretty good duty station for Marines, isn't it?
It is. It's absolutely beautiful there. And I'd never, grown up or lived on the beach. So it was definitely nice to live there. It's hot and humid, but it was nice to be stationed.
Yeah, I took Don Graves there a few years ago, and that's just like Marines are everywhere. So
yes, they are.
He was welcomed wherever we went. So, and your occupation was working on jet airplanes or just general aviation?
So ground support equipment is ultimately my specialty was aviation hydraulic structural mechanic. It was two parts at the time, where you had mechanics and electricians, and I was on the mechanical side. So the equipment that attaches to all the aircraft, whether it's fixed wing or rotary wing, so we can be stationed at either type of base. It's different, sometimes different equipment, but like even in the civilian sector, a tow tractor or like a tow bar attaching to the aircraft to push you back, like that, all the support equipment is what I worked on.
That's a big part of aviation, that people just think that you don't need a lot of equipment when it's on the ground. But I know Mary, she's well versed in all the ground support equipment, aren't you, Mary?
Well, I'm not well versed in all of it. I was the first sergeant, and the age guys were definitely a part of our maintenance, because like you said, anytime you're dealing with that plane on the ground, you got to have age out there. So you've got to have that help. But yeah, fortunately, I never had to actually work on anything, because mechanics is not my forte.
You're just better
Well, when I went in the Air Force, back in 1978, and you took the ASVAB in high school like everybody does, I scored real well in general and admin and even pretty darn good in electronics, but my mechanical score 15. After you're in a few years, they downgrade your scores. I ended up with a 13. So that was really good that I didn't end up in any maintenance AFSC.
Well, Kara, after you finished your training, then did you go to a place where you stayed for a while?
Yes, my first duty station was Iwakuni, Japan, which is what is known as mainland Japan. So it's opposite of Tokyo. It's mainly, a lot of people know Okinawa for the Marine Corps base and Air Force bases, but we're actually mainland and a smaller base. It's just a wing base out there in Iwakuni, and that's where I was stationed for 2 years. I was only out there a year, and I asked to extend another year. I absolutely loved that country and loved the command and just everything out there. I mean, that was the first time I've ever left the country. And so it was at 18, it was very nerve-wracking to figure out transportation and how to get to base. And but it was a really just absolutely beautiful place to see and be for my first duty station. And
then you had a whole different culture too that you were living around, with the chopstick. Can you eat with chopsticks good?
I can. I can eat with chopsticks, but I'm not a fan of sushi. I think that's the only thing that I can't just sit at a sushi restaurant there and where they have it on the wheel and you just eat raw fish. I could never do that. So, but I can eat with chopsticks. We all still eat with chopsticks actually in the house.
Not all the time though.
No, not all the time. We do eat a lot of Asian cultured food, I guess, given my husband's background. So we do have we eat more Asian food, I think, than anything.
Your husband, he was a Marine too, correct?
Yes.
You met in Japan. You met in Japan.
Yes, we did. We initially met in Japan or knew of each other in Japan. Our MOSs overlap a lot. We just didn't really connect right away. We kind of butted heads actually. So, but we did know each other. We just didn't do anything specific together out in Japan. It wasn't until I got stationed in California and he just happened to be here too that we kind of connected.
So from Japan, you went to California and then
I went to Camp Pendleton, to the logistics squadron out there, 39, which is another wing on Pendleton, and was stationed there the remaining part of my career outside of deployments.
Okay. So a girl from Texas, you go to Japan and then come back to California. So there's a lot of changes. I know that back in 1974, whenever I moved to California, here I was, from Texas and in the Bible Belt and everything. California was a rude awakening for this young kid whenever I went to California.
Yes.
Start seeing things that we don't do that in Texas.
Yeah, that's true. I also, my first vehicle I bought myself was an F-350, and there's no reason for that out there.
Just a little bitty truck, huh?
Yeah, just little. It made me feel safe on the roads out there, though. That was very, very different being from such a small town. And then coming to that level of I even drove. I had my driver's license in Japan, and so I drove, and so that was interesting to relearn how to drive in America versus in Japan.
Did they drive on the opposite side of the road like they do in England?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So it was a learning curve to where we turn right on red, they turn left on red, and so not doing that in America or being on the other side of the car again, and it was interesting.
Whenever I went to California, I was stationed at Fort Ord, which is just south of San Francisco in Monterey. So whenever I came down on orders to go to California, I thought, oh my, I'm going to learn how to surf and do all this stuff on the beach. And you get up there and there's this Arctic current that comes through Monterey Bay. And I mean, it's really cold water. So there's not anybody surfing hardly. So, but where you were down around San Diego, it's a little bit warmer down there. So
it's still not as warm as Pensacola. So I wasn't a big fan of the beach. It was too cold.
Yeah. So where did you go on your deployment?
I was deployed to Afghanistan in 2011. So I personally went to what was known as Camp Leatherneck at the time, and that's where I started. But then I went to a smaller forward operating base, also known as the FOB, down on Camp Dwyer. And we were down there. I was the only female down there, which happened a lot because I was the only female in Japan for a long time in the maintenance department. But we had a set of Cobras, 6 at the time. We lost one while we were there, unfortunately, to just a fueling mishap, actually, where it unfortunately took the gunner's life. So we were down to 5. But ultimately, I ran my GSE division, plus I kind of was taking a higher billet, a staff billet, to run the whole logistics squadron, which I'd never done. I just was one of those things you better figure out so that we could support the Cobras down there. Because anytime ground side needed air support, then it was our responsibility to make sure that that squadron was supported and had Cobras up in the air ready to go. And that was on my left side. On the right side, we had Army medevacs, and they didn't really have a lot of aviation support down there. So anything they needed that we could also help with, we would help medevacs. And it never failed. Go ahead.
What kind of aircraft did they use, the Army medevacs?
The Black Hawk, I think, is what that is. I think that's what I'm not very good with their aircraft, but I know that in return, they let us fly on one to deliver medical supplies with them one time. The XO and CO were the pilots and co-pilot, and they thought it would be funny to act like we were crashing. And because they were all like in on it, and that was not funny. So I never got back on one again. But it was extremely hot. I was there from May to November of 2011. And it's definitely one of those things, like, you go into the military and, yes, we're in war, but I mean, I was only in 8th grade when 9/11 happened, and I didn't know what the Twin Towers were. I didn't know the impact of what was happening that day. I remember it, and I remember everything unfolding, but that didn't connect with me. And I really obviously didn't think that all those years later, I would be in Afghanistan supporting the same war. I knew nothing, of the incident back in 8th grade. So to be out there so many years later, then you really get to see the impact of your job. You don't always feel like your job is worth anything because it's just training and you're turning wrenches, but seeing the difference, like they would say, there's no air support without ground support. And that's true. The aircraft, whether it's helicopters or fixed wing jets, like they're not going anywhere without our job. And so it was
pretty important
importance of it. And that really resonated with me out there and made it so much more powerful to be out there, I guess.
A few years ago, you had that reunion of other people that did your occupation.
Correct.
And I got to go spend a few days with these people. It was a good reunion, and you had a lot of the Marines that you'd served with. And tell us how that all came about.
So I reconnected with some Marines that I hadn't seen in years. I had just come across some pictures, and then I was like, man, I wonder where they're at. And so then I just kind of started looking for them on social media. As I did, I unfortunately found some of them to no longer be with us. A couple of them have committed suicide. And so the others, I just started reaching out. And then I just got this like random idea about us getting together. And so they were like, yeah, let's do like a reunion. And I was like, well, I just want it to be MOS specific. Like, I don't know that I could do a Marine Corps reunion. I'd like it to be more personable because, we are close and kind of share like our stories. And so obviously I served with some older, Marines, or some of the GSE Marines are still in actually, that, didn't get out like myself. So I had actually started planning to do something in 2019 prior to Christmas. And then it just started to get more and more. And once I threw it out there, more of us started connecting. And then I found local, Marines that I served with that are here in DFW. And then like my friend Carl, we connected over that, and he really helped me put that together. So it really was, I know that I personally have always had a mental health battle with the suicide ideations, given what I went through the Marine Corps and as a child, and just always focusing on mental health, but knowing that it's not always easy for us to get the help that we needed and the resources we needed. And that just seemed to be a niche for me. So I decided to do this reunion. And even though COVID hit, with the help from Carl and yourself and Air Power Foundation, Holidays and Heroes, everybody else, Karalyn Martin, everybody else that like helped me with that, we still made it possible. And ultimately, the whole design of it was a suicide prevention reunion to kind of check on each other, get everybody together, and make sure that we're okay and know that they're not alone. So we still have a group. It just has a little over 1,000. I mean, it's a small MOS. But they're asking to do it again. They really enjoyed that. I mean, what's known as One Tribe Now was a big part of that. It was ultimately just to, I think we did the 3 R's: reminisce, reconnect, and I can't even remember what the other one was. Like, just kind of to connect and go back over things and just ultimately know that we're there for each other. And so we did
One Tribe really gave you a lot of support because they had classes, they had counselors.
Mm-hmm.
I think Tempa Cheryl was there, as well as Jacob Schick.
Yes.
And, it's just an incredible weekend. And I'd like to see more groups like that come together for a weekend like that, because they really took it serious. I mean,
Yes.
it was a good time. It was a lot of laughter and stuff, but they
Yes.
really took those classes serious. Don Graves, he was there, so it was a good time. And I'm friends on social media with several of those guys, and there's that one guy that had the big beard, Eddie.
Eddie.
The long hair. He looked kind of like the guy from The Hangover, if you've ever seen that movie.
Yeah.
The Hangover.
Yes, he does.
And he was a real character. So
yeah, and his story is something that I'll never forget. So I've been approached about doing it again. I'm nervous about taking on that load again by myself, and I know that it kind of overlapped. That I just happened to later into the planning sign up to do Miss Veteran America, which I'll never do again anyways. But that was just a lot of work, and so I think I would be okay. I just know that, like I asked if y'all really want to do this again, and we are talking about doing it again, is that some of them want to go to Vegas or they want to go, but they have to understand that like it's fun about funding and about what's realistic, to get people in. Like DFW was a good place, and then I just have a huge network here and resources here that I don't obviously have across the United States. So I know some of them just kind of more want it to be a party to get together, and I get that. But if you're really wanting it, then I was just, even going to the base, like some of they're like, oh, you're the one that did the reunion. Are you going to do that again? And I would love to, because when you brought up Eddie, even after I gave my story, when he stood up and talked about up to coming to that reunion, that he was at the point where he was drinking at the bottom of the bottle and every night, with a handgun and questioning whether he should still be here or not. And he's still here with us because of that. And that will always sit with me. So I'd love to do it again. It's just a matter of having a team to put it together, so I don't do it by myself.
That was a tremendous amount of work, and you were going through some other things at the time. And I think, man, how's she doing all this? But
yes,
you had a lot of help, especially with the Air Power Foundation.
Yes, and Taya Kyle too, who was there to speak, and I think they really loved that. I think they saw that I was genuine in it. And I was. Once it finally came down, I was like really shy and reserved, because I'm not exactly not the person that's going to just stand up there and just talk, I guess. I just was like, here, I want to do this for you. But then I take myself out of it, if that makes sense, because I get too anxious to be amongst everybody. But I know it helped me too. And yeah, I couldn't have done it with all the support, that's for sure. And that's what I kind of told them. I know you want it other places, but if you want me to do it again, I need a team, and I most likely would have to do it here in DFW again.
Yeah, I'm all for it. I'd like to do it again. Well, you mentioned that's about the time that you were doing the Miss American Veteran Select. And how did you get involved in that?
So in 2020, I did Miss Veteran America, which is with Final Salute Incorporated, and they're an actual nonprofit, and that's kind of like their fundraising way is pageantry, or their version of pageantry, to raise awareness for homeless female veterans and their children, because as we know, that is one of the top grossing numbers that are unaccounted for, because when we do the homeless counts, you're not going to find homeless female veterans and their children, because they're couch bouncing or in their cars, because the VA doesn't pay for the shelters that you would have that are military don't get funding for women and children, or even men and children. Children aren't included in that. So then they're not able to stay in those shelters. So I originally did that because I just thought it would be cool to do, I guess, and wondered if it was a thing. And so I kind of threw myself into it in 2020. COVID happened. So that's kind of what got me into it. And then the following year, somebody told me about rural production pageants, and they had just launched a veterans only division. And that's who has the America Select Veteran division. And so there was like 5 or 6 of us, I think, that competed in that. And that's more actual pageantry. And the nationals are in Atlanta. And that was really something I've just never, not a world I know. So I just got there and did what I was supposed to do, but kind of lost my butt in front of everybody. And then I just was like, I'm never doing this again. It's not really my thing. But they begged me to come back, and just being with other female veterans and competing against just them, and having a platform. Ultimately, my goal in doing pageantry was to bring awareness to what is done here in North Texas, to kind of take Holidays and Heroes and Roll Call and One Tribe and Air Power Foundation to a national level, to just education and outreach. And so I went last year, and so now I do have the national title for Miss America Select Veteran for 23-24. I absolutely love it, but I don't think that it's quite done what I would like it to do. It takes more of my time than I would rather just give back to like the nonprofits that I'm a part of. So it's definitely a different world, but I got into it because I just was trying to find a different way to give back, a different way to take what we do here in North Texas to a national level. And that's
so you went from Marine Corps veteran to a pageant winner, and you're pretty diversified in things you do, because you go from this to that. So
right, yeah. And that previous picture was Pin Up for Vets, which is another opportunity that I've had to do, which was another nonprofit out in California, that they go and visit veterans in hospitals and rehab places and help donate. The money, those calendars, goes to help donating medical supplies that the VA funding doesn't get. So
yeah, I think Jessica Gross, she did that too, the veterans calendar. So
yes, that's how we kind of connected with one of the photographers that does, like, because my group ended up doing that deck of cards, and that photographer is a Marine veteran. He's actually made quite a few things for for Don. His name's Doug. And so he's made quite a few things for Don Graves. He's a big fan. He sent him like Iwo Jima sand and the poster of Jessica and stuff. That's all Doug Stidham's photography. And he's a Desert Storm Marine.
And everybody's a big fan of Don Graves, it seems like.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Mary spends a lot of time in the car and at different events with Don. And
actually I didn't get the chance to talk to her because I just I'd never been there before, and we were guests of other Marines that had purchased a table. It was the Cowtown Warriors Gala on the 24th. So we were not prepared for that level of gala when we showed up. So we felt kind of underdressed, but it was an honor to be there and to see Don. I've never seen Don in his dress blues. So I was smitten, and then I didn't even get to talk to him because I didn't get up.
I was surprised you wore them, because he always says, I can't button them. I got to go on a diet. I can't button my uniform. But he didn't button up here because he said he so good.
Like he did. He looked good. He looked sharp, and I always love hearing him sing, and I always love hearing his stories, and I love hearing like his health is good, like hearing him get up there and talk. And my great grandfather, who served in World War II, was alive all the way up until my son was born, and he just turned 8. So I have that opportunity to grow up learning history and respecting, like, he was drafted and served in the Army, but that's the only other person that's ever served, to my knowledge, biologically. And he was everything to me. So they would have been about the same age. And I think so then he reminds me a lot of him. And they're from Detroit, by the way. They literally immigrated from Malta to Detroit. So he reminds me a lot of my Maltese side of my family. And I think that's why to not just the Marine Corps, but just as a human, I really connect with him, because he's a great person.
So he grew up in Detroit just like Don did.
Yes, he did.
'Cause, I've heard a lot of stories that Don's told about his time in Detroit, and
Mm-hmm.
just it seems like a good place to grow up. So maybe
Yeah.
not
Back
now,
then,
but back then.
yeah, yeah, back then anyway, right?
Yeah.
So you do a lot for veterans. I mean, you're a veteran advocate, and you work with a lot of different organizations to help veterans.
Mm-hmm.
So how did that come about? Because you've been doing that for many years.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, when I got out of the military and I jumped straight into cosmetology school, and that was really just like I didn't know what to do, and I wasn't like girly, and like grease and 90 weight oil was like my definition of like what would be on my face. So I jumped into cosmetology school, and what I really liked about that was not just like learning, but was that I made people feel better at the end of the day in the chair. And so when my husband actually got sent to RS Detroit for recruiting. And so I got sent from San Diego, California to Detroit, Michigan myself. That was a different world. They were super behind up there. And so I was like, well, what do I do now? And I just decided to go through and finish my education in my undergrad in psychology. That doesn't really get you anywhere in a job field. So then I was like, okay, well, what do I do now? And then I personally battled the San Diego VA, and then Ann Arbor was really good to me. And then I came here, and it's like, nobody wants to go to the Dallas VA, and then the Fort Worth VA can have issues. And so as I navigated my way with no transition help, and as we started to lose friends, I saw a trend. And so in my undergrad studies in psychology, I actually did a doctorate level, which they've asked to publish. And I don't want to, like, I can't imagine people doing a dissertation. Like, I just don't want to do it. It's a lot of work, but my study was looking at transition trauma being a precursor to suicide. And I didn't find that transition trauma necessarily was a precursor, but what I did find is the longer that they serve and the less resources they have, the more likely they're to commit suicide and have suicide ideations. So I kind of took that knowledge. And then when I moved into North Texas, I went to do my graduate degree in social work. And then every time I got the opportunity, I just really dug into research on mental health and veterans. And they just, as long as I fulfilled the assignment, then it was good. And I focused on that. And then as I personally struggled with stuff, I started to learn the loopholes. I started to learn the connections and networking and what that does for people. And so I just kind of found that to be a niche in helping others and networking and then resources. So I used what I needed help with and all the work it took me to get the help that I needed, the mental health through like Recovery Resource Council. My dog my late dog, Coco, was a service dog, was trained by Nexus Service Dogs. And so that ultimately connected me to Air Power Foundation. One of their people at the time wanted to present Air Power Foundation's board with a plaque of thank you and asked me just to come and be just to kind of just be there to show like I was a recipient of that, not knowing that I just happened to live in Fort Worth. So I went, and then that's when I kind of got tied in with Air Power Foundation many years ago. They asked me to tell my story, and I told them, like I had suicide ideations and I wouldn't go anywhere. But my lab helped me with the mobility, whether it was mental, physical, because I've had multiple surgeries too. And they trained him at no cost, and him too, right? That a lot of times you don't get to train your own dog and the veteran. And that was just really accessible to me. And they just really worked hard to make sure that we met all the legal requirements and went above and beyond. And so when I got tied into Air Power Foundation, they asked me to speak. I started telling my story. I was still struggling personally with mental health and had 2 young babies back to back, unintentionally, that I continued to get help and then realized that Air Power Foundation was still backing these places like Recovery Resource Council is where I did EMDR. And that really ultimately saved my life. Because I wasn't doing okay. And so knowing what I went through and all that stuff and then seeing other veterans, I just used those tools that I had to learn myself and then started to share them. And then just took I just love helping. Ultimately, like I just really love helping. I feel like that's my purpose. I mean, I know I have lots of hats like as a mom and stuff, but there's just something rewarding about being able to do stuff because I know it's difficult and I know it's hard and nobody wants to do it. So how can I help reduce that? Because I only wish at the time that there would have been somebody to help me. And then now, obviously, going forward, Holidays and Heroes and the people behind it, yourself, Mary, Roll Call, Air Power Foundation, the board, especially Wanda, I don't have family. And so all of you, and this is gonna be emotional for me, but all of you have played such a huge part in my life, that it's really driven me to continue to help others, because I see the example you set as well. And I just really love it. Like, it really makes a difference for me to keep putting it foot and forward, because I can use what I'm good at for other people. And that's why I do everything that I do. And I kind of run myself into the ground, but ultimately I wouldn't be here without y'all. And I just want to continue to pay that forward.
And you do a good job at that. You've got a pretty big social media presence too. So I know that helps get the word out to people.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I heard your story was at a Skyball kickoff. It was over in South Lake or someplace like that. Yeah, it was an appliance store or something, or appliance showroom. And you and I think maybe Michael Jernigan was at that one. I don't remember. Kayla, what's her name?
Kyle.
Kyle. Yeah, she was there. I think at that one too. But I think that's the first time I heard your story. And of course, Don Graves was here. So he's everywhere. So
he's high demand.
Yeah. And I'm sure he's saying "God bless America" there too. So
yeah, I think with Jennifer Nickerson and
I think she did we had two of them back to back. There was one over in Dallas and then that one. And
right. In South Lake and then in Addison, I believe. Yes.
Yeah. And one of them, Jennifer, got hooked, in traffic or something. I don't know. She made it on time to sing the national anthem, but she's another one I see every place,
Yes.
She does a lot of television work, a lot of interviews. Of course, she sings. So
yeah, no, you don't want me singing. Not even with Congress. It's like
I'm with you.
I can't carry a tune in my pocket.
I sing a lot, but it's when I'm by myself, and
I don't even do
I
that.
think it sounds good.
You sing in church because God don't care how you sound, right?
Yeah, I usually will lip the words, because even then, I don't want to ruin people's church experience. But even my kids, they'll be like, "My daughter said, 'Bless your heart, Mama.'" So I was like, okay, but yeah, it's always just so rewarding too to be around other veterans. This is such a great community of hometown heroes. I mean, we really have just great patriotic people in this area. And I am not a city person. Like, I want out so bad, but I can't imagine leaving. Like, I just can't. I can't imagine ever walking away from everything that I'm a part of now and the people.
You say that about this area, and I've been thinking a lot about the military history here in Fort Worth. Fort Worth was a military outpost. That's how it began, the fort. And then we come along to World War One, and we had Camp Bowie and trained tens of thousands of people going to Europe to fight in World War One. And then 1941 comes along, and we had Air Force Plant Number 4, and which is now Lockheed Martin. It started out as consolidated aircraft, and they built about 3,000 B-24s that were used in Europe and over in the South Pacific. So you think about just in those, up to World War II, there were tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people supporting the war effort.
Yeah, and not even just here in Benbrook. We had Benbrook Field, have the Vernon Castle Memorial, where we were training the English. And he and his wife were big dancers at the time. It was World War I, if I remember right. And he crashed and died right down just 3 houses away from where I live. Oh my goodness! And there's a memorial there. So you're right, Rick. This area is rich with military history and tradition. And we, I think that DFW, and I obviously not is full on the D part, but the more you move west from middle of Dallas, it gets even bigger and bigger and bigger, where there's huge support. Look at how many Lockheed plants and Bell and all the military industrial complex that we have here in this part of the state. And it's just, we really are very fortunate to live in a place that appreciates and honors and is willing to contribute, because we couldn't do most of what we do if it weren't for the contributions that come into the Air Power Foundation and Roll Call and Holidays and Heroes and all the other organizations, One Tribe, all of those organizations that are doing such great work. But without the folks in the community being willing to contribute those dollars, none of our organizations could do anything. So
right. Yeah, and that's what I like learning about Cowtown Warriors too, was that they serve. It's one thing to serve, Air Power Foundation serves the nation, and Holidays and Heroes serves local, and I love that. Especially being on the back end of that, seeing how important that is. Roll Call serves local, and then Cowtown serves local. We have the top number of veterans in the United States right here in North Texas.
Yeah.
And then the corporations like Lockheed and Bell, they pour a lot of their finances into supporting our veterans and our military. And, we all three aren't only involved in veterans and supporting them, but in the military, supporting our folks at NASJRB. And so it's just a great area to be in the military or be a veteran. So
yeah, and I know GE Aviation is obviously more commercial, but being that that's who my husband works for now, I can't tell you how many veterans work for them. And his boss is a veteran. He was a retired officer, I think, out of the Air Force, and he went from Lockheed to GE. And I know that I can't personally say what's going on over there, but I can tell you that it'll be the top on earth, in the world, right here in Dallas. And I foresee them jumping on board with, we're hoping to possibly be a big sponsor coming up for all of this other stuff, especially Air Power Foundation, and making those connections, because they hire a lot of veterans as well.
And you mentioned Air Power. Tell us about Air Power, because you and I are both ambassadors for the Air Power Foundation, and they do a lot of great work. And tell us a little bit about them and what they do.
So Air Power Foundation is a 501c3. We are celebrating, I think it's our 25th anniversary this year. And what they do is, we raise money all year. Ultimately, though, they're one of the few foundations or 501c3s that provides grants. They don't do it just in annually. They actually do it monthly. So every month, different nonprofits, veteran nonprofits across the United States put in their grant applications, and then they meet once a month with the committee and the board, and they go through and decide who's getting the grants for the month. And so, for example, Next Up Service Dogs used to be a recipient, and that's for veterans and service dogs, mainly their own service dogs. Recovery Resource Council is grant funded by them, and that is mental health resources, and that's free. 18 sessions are free with people who are trained to work with military and understand that. There's Adaptive Training Foundation that is not just, for those of us that are disabled and look normal versus being amputated, they are, big up there. And so Air Power Foundation ultimately just raises money throughout the year. And then our huge gala and fundraiser for the year is Skyball, which is every year now over at Globe Life Field and in November. And that is our biggest fundraiser. And that money turns around and goes back to the community, whether it's Holidays and Heroes is, grant funded by them, that helps provide Christmas for our reserve and active duties anywhere stationed in DFW now. So they are just a foundation that continues to education outreach and provide money back to nonprofits that give to us veterans. And a lot of times it's services that we can't get through the VA or anywhere else, and free for us as as veterans. And that's the gist of what Air Power Foundation does. Of course, you both know that we now have the Air Power Foundation Royal Court, which I am honored to be a part of that committee as well. And what we do with that is that it's, military connected as well. Our 3 current court ladies have connection to the military in some way, shape, or form, whether it's a parent, a brother, sister. And that's really about like our education outreach, connecting us to the community more because they are either in college, still in high school, real big into North Texas. The Rodeo Association, we work with Donna Snow King with that and her husband, and in doing education outreach and having them be the face of Air Power Foundation. And that comes with just trying, like what I would, wanted to do initially is kind of taking that to a national level, reaching people across to get more people to know about Air Power Foundation, to raise money, and then more people to apply for grants to give out that money. So ultimately they don't just serve this area, they're serving, our nation, $1 at a time.
That's right. And Mary and I were witnesses this weekend to Air Power Foundation and the Fort Worth Air Power Council at work. The 301st had Family Day in ASGRB, and the day before they had the First Sergeant's Burger Burn or something like that.
Yeah, Burger Burn.
But how many people do you think were there Sunday, Mary? 1,000 or more?
They were expecting about the wing 2,000, 2,500, depending on who all shows up and if the 10th Air Force comes out. For me, it was a homecoming too, because I was out there representing roll call, though I'm part of the Air Power Council also. But it's neat because you're able to provide stuff so that those folks that are there on the weekend can enjoy it with their family, as opposed to in the years past. So obviously it had been 5 years since there was a picnic, and that was a lot. So I was still part of the wing 5 years ago, and we did all of the work. We set up all the tables. We had games for the kids. We did all the cooking, everything else. So when you get the organizations coming out to do that, it frees the family up to allow those that are serving out there to just enjoy it with their family and not have to be worried about clean up and set up and cooking and all the other craziness. So that's good. It's really awesome.
And, Jimmy Thomason, Vietnam veteran who was a helicopter pilot, he got his friends at Standard Meat to donate 90 briskets. And then he got Charlie Guerin and the Railhead Barbecue to smoke those 90 briskets. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then there was a whole host of people out there chopping the briskets up to make chopped barbecue. So they made
it was good.
Ton of sandwiches, ton of hamburgers. So it was a good way to see how the Air Power Foundation, the Fort Worth Air Power Council, Holidays and Heroes, Roll Call, all come together to be part of that. So,
and we were all out there too at the last 301st event, the Patriot Games this summer. And I was there for that. And same thing, we were all out there super early, and like, I don't do mornings. So my neighbor is a good friend of mine and Mary's, Alex Venezuela. And I was like, hey, you have to work this weekend. Do you think you could drive? I want to go volunteer, but people kind of like, you see that kind of a trend is, yes, I'm a veteran, and, insert sarcastic pun of what happens to us. And I physically look okay, but what people don't know is after multiple surgeries and the neurological disorder I have is that like the fatigue and falling asleep at the wheel, or I can't feel my legs sometimes, or it buckles. And so driving isn't always safe for me. So then having that opportunity, and we were all out there too, for that. And it's always great because it's always like a reunion too, locally, to see everybody multiple times a month, and just always coming together just kind of ties us back to how great the community is.
Absolutely. Another great organization is Holidays and Heroes. And tell us about that, because you're an ambassador for Holidays and Heroes.
Yes. So Holidays of Heroes, again, is also another licensed or I guess qualified or actual 501c3. And they provide, originally was the kind of the mission was just to serve NASJRB, but we've kind of expanded it to anybody that's signed or stationed here at DFW. And so on the back end of it, we have an application process now. We're trying to come up to 2024 standards of doing things electronic and also just making it a little more smoother for the families and for sponsors. But ultimately, anybody that applies, and as long as they aren't making, we are taking income into an example. But after being on that committee, I can tell you it was really, I don't know how our military is making it financially, even if both parents are working in the home with the children based on their pay. And that's disheartening that, Holidays and Heroes kind of began with Carrie and her neighbors filling stockings and providing those. And then it's turned into this where we actually, each family does the application, goes through the process, fills out a wish list, gets signed to a sponsor. These are very generous community people, and they can be from all over, either sponsor the families, and then they either shop for them, they get their wish list, or they're shoppers like myself that go shopping for that wish list. We wrap everything up, and then Carrie and the whole team does this phenomenal job, typically on base the first weekend of December, and puts together this Christmas. So we don't just give them all their Christmas, and that includes the service member and their spouse, if there's one, all the children. It's also very realistic, right? We're not giving out game consults and stuff like that. It's stuff that's needed or wanted. Santa flies in, parachutes in. There's Star Wars characters. There's Santa, Mrs. Claus take pictures. The pictures are free. The food, games. It's a whole entire event. Again, more networking and to provide, give back to those that give to us. And that's exactly what Holidays and Heroes does, is just gives them the Christmas that they deserve, that they should have, and shouldn't have to be worried about every year with our economy and inflation and just anything else that they might run into, because there's also, unusual circumstances, right? Like a lot of them aren't from here and they're put here. And our economy is just not the greatest right now. So Holidays and Heroes provides these families assigned to the DFW area, because we do Army, National Guard, Air Force, or Air National Guard. I'm learning some of the overlap in those, Marines, Navy, just really trying to outreach and serving hundreds of families for Christmas and giving them that Christmas and that opportunity.
And Mary, being a retired first sergeant, she is well aware of how what a great impact organizations like the Fort Worth Air Power Council, the Air Power Foundation, Holidays and Heroes have on our military, because you had to go kind of run interference and help these families and know who needed help and how to get the help. And I think that really helps you today, because you're still running interference for veterans and military, plugging in the people that can help them. Because so many times we just want to jump in and say, oh, we'll help you. But if there's somebody that can do it better, you're good at that, Mary.
There's so many organizations that do so much. And the thing that you learn when you're, as a first sergeant, you get to know more intimate details of your soldier, sailor, airman, Marine. You get to know those things about them that maybe the general public might not know, where they may be a 20-year-old kid who is a reservist getting paid 39 days a year and then has a job at home making, barely minimum wage or a little more, and they're taking care of their mom, their dad, and their sister. Or you may have an active duty airman who has a wife with an illness who is not completely covered by the system, and they're moved, as Karalyn said, they're away from their support structure. They're not home with family and everything else, and maybe have disabled children. So you get to know things about people's life. And it's not so much about us each individually doing it ourselves, to your point, Rick. It's about us knowing where those resources are. And while roll call, our big thing is a monthly luncheon that brings them, people go, okay, well, it's a monthly luncheon free for veterans, big deal. But what it does is it brings those veterans together where they get to sit and they get to share stories in the safety of a group of people who knows where they are, what they've done, what they've been through. And it really helps them to get those things out and share them. And it helps with all of the things that Kara's talking about. It helps with the potential for suicide. I had to deal with that as a first sergeant. I had an airman that we came back from a deployment and he committed suicide a month later. And, you know, all of those things that you learn, that we learn throughout our lives, we take and we use to help other people. So roll call doesn't do, it's not our thing to go help people build ramps or help people with PTS or help people, you know, get through some awful things that have happened to them and they need, you know, adaptive training foundation. But what we know is who we can refer you to and where we can send you to get that help. And we do that at the lunch too. There's not a lunch that comes up that people aren't coming up to me saying, hey, I'm struggling with my disability claim, or I need help with this, or I need help with that. And we just start to connect dots. And that's what a lot of us do, is we know enough to know how to connect the dots.
And that's what Kara does too, is to kind of help filter out the people. I don't know if you're involved with Combined Arms, but they are a real good resource. Servolution's another good resource to help in building or construction for our veterans. But
and Texas Veteran Commission, I'm familiar with Combined Arms. One of the things that just quickly too is the Veteran Treatment Court. You know, the national CBS came down here to interview the program manager, Courtney Young, on that, who actually has attended roll call quite a few times on my behalf or just in general. But running Veterans Treatment Court is another, it's grant funded, it's not a nonprofit, but making those connections too, because that ultimately stops our veterans from the cycle. And I've been a part of that for many years. And it's just, like you said, the, you know, roll call its mission may not be everything you just listed, but ultimately it does do that, because I can tell you that somebody will throw it on Facebook and they tag roll call, and then you do have a ramp built, or you've got somebody visiting somebody in hospice. Or I looked a second ago to the side, because in order to not have carpal tunnel or whatever, I made my own like birthday cards for roll call, and then it says roll call at the bottom. It says happy birthday. I fill them out still, and then it's USMC veteran, my name, and fellow roll call members. They know it's coming from a roll call member, and you know, the same kind of what y'all posted. But I made these so that I can make sure that especially when the lists are long, that everybody gets one.
For real. And you know, I get so many comments on those cards. People are just blown away at the number of cards they get. And then when I put something out for somebody who's not doing well, or, you know, is struggling with some health issues, and folks send cards to them. I had one of the veterans call me the other day and say, you know, I can't tell you how much that meant to me, that people were wishing me well when I was not doing good. And it's these little things that do make such a big difference. And, you know, it's so simple. It's a card and a stamp, but it's those little things that make a difference.
Yeah. And being able to send mail like this too, is I help my children. Like, my children are born in a generation where everything's electronic, right? And I want them to like be a part of some of this stuff. And so when they can, they'll be with me as they've gotten older. But this is as simple as showing them how to put a return address and write an address and use a stamp, and what the stamp costs, and how do you use the mailbox. And that was always my funnest thing as a kid now. And I don't know why, but they helped me do that and put it together, because it can be a long list. And I received my birthday card too. I mean, I know we all get them, you know, at least one. And this, it looks like a child may have written it this time around. It was and if it's not, I feel bad, but it looks like it may have come from like some volunteer children. And I'm not sure if that's, you know, the case, but
it could have been.
The kid might have
it's amazing the number of people who get their children involved, and they,
Yes.
we've got them. Heck, that one of the little girls that comes to the lunch and helps her mama she can't be 5 years old, but she's cute as a button, and she's out there helping to serve meals. And I'm just always so blown away. I really am. And then, it's going to the funerals, and we don't like to think about that, but our particular audience, the majority of our veterans are Vietnam and World War II. And when we lose them, we've lost Jerry Meyerson. We lost him a few weeks ago. We lost Bob Youngers unexpectedly, and we just lost Billy Robertson that I had put out a prayer thing for. I just found out this morning that we lost him. But when we send out the messages for people to send cards to the family, we also send out the information for the services. And the more roll call people we can get there, it shows their family how important they were to us as part of the roll call family. Because I always say, we're just a big family. We just happen to be really large.
Yes.
So, it's like having a family reunion once a month.
Yes, it is.
And with roll call, going to the funerals and being there, I've heard several times the family said, that their veteran, that was the one big thing they looked forward to every month, was being at roll call.
Yeah, that is. And especially if they're World War II. In the case of Bob Youngers, when his service happens next week, I'll wear my uniform. And there have been a few times when I was glad that I wore it, because not all of them can find their 214. And that's something that we all have to really start talking to veterans about, is you need to make sure your family has your DD 214, because it really impacts everything at the time of a loss. And if it weren't for Greenwood having Bob Youngers from when his wife passed, his family could not find his 214. And I would have expected, different, but you have to make sure your family knows where that 214 is, because there have been a number of times where they couldn't get military honors. And I was at a funeral in uniform, and the funeral director will come to me and ask me to present the flag to the family, which I'm always, I'm just honored to be able to do it, but it is a very emotional thing, and they deserve those honors. And because somebody can't find that 214, and we do have an emergency way to get one. So if somebody finds themselves in that position and they are like, dude, we can't find it, we need it. We have a contact that we can get an emergency, let's try to get it quickly if they contact us at info@roll-call.org. But don't put your family in that position. Make sure that somebody in your family, or more than one somebody, has a copy of your DD 214, and the right copy of it, because there's multiple copies. And
I know
what the whole big deal with that is, but it's got to be the one that has your code for your discharge. So if they don't
remember
want to make sure that you have the right code is what they're looking for. So you have to have the right copy of the discharge.
My grandfather unexpectedly passed in July and had served, was drafted for Vietnam. And I didn't really even know that. I mean, I knew he served, but he just never talked about it. So I didn't know that he was towards the end of the Vietnam era. But fine. So again, he just woke up, had a heart attack, didn't wake up, right? Just went to stand up, had a heart attack. And then it was about finding his stuff. And thankfully we were able to do that with Lucas Funeral Home. Of course, that owner, Kelly is amazing. Also a Fort Worth Air Power Council member now. And that's how I met him, right? That's just an example. I met him when we went to the Fort Cavazos thing with Fort Worth Air Power Council. And he gave me his card, and I'm like, oh, I need a funeral director's information. And I'd be darned if not 2 months later, my grandfather unexpectedly passed away, and I didn't know what to do. And I called him on a Sunday, and he went above and beyond everything he did, to even showing up personally to preside over it, and did American flag poker chips and a golf tee and flags, and said some things and played a song. I mean, and made sure that everything was done and taken care of over at the National Cemetery. And just that one connection, that one trip. And everything. That was everything to me, having that connection, because I would have been lost.
There's a lot of great people out there that support us, and we just are so honored that they do that. So, well, Kara, our time's about up for today, and we appreciate you so much, and we're really honored that you were with us today, so we can find out more about you and the things that you do with the Air Power Foundation and with Holidays and Heroes and with all the other veterans events that you do. And I'm looking forward to another reunion. I hope I'm on the invitation list.
Of course you are, and I know I'm gonna, as the comments have popped up, I'll reach out and start working on it and see if I can get a team together. And to me, that's kind of a sign. If it keeps getting brought up, it needs to get done, so that we can.
Somebody, I think you saw that one that said we need to have another reunion. So
yes, and make sure one tribe is a part of that. They're a huge resource in the DFW area, and yeah, absolutely. Thank you both again for having me today on this. It's an absolute honor, and I'm very, very honored not just to be on here, but to be a part of all of this with y'all as well, in our community. So thank you.
You need to come to roll call.
Yes.
She does.
Yeah, I do.
Sometimes I don't get to, I know I see her name on the list, but there's so many people there, I don't get to see her. And then I look up and she's serving plates of food, and that's the last I see her.
Yeah,
And
sometimes I'm in and
somewhere, and then she's lost again. It's shocking how you know that somebody's there, but there's so many people, you can't find anyone. So I have to get on the microphone.
Will get the best of me, and I'll sit and I won't move. I won't move. So it's just sometimes good and bad if I can, but if sometimes but I always like to jump up and help. It makes me feel less anxious.
Yeah.
We appreciate you.
Thank you.
And I'm sure our paths will cross very soon.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for being a part of Hometown Heroes today. We appreciate you and your service to our country.
Thank you.
We'll see you soon. I hope that everybody was able to get on Facebook. I know that a lot of my Facebook was down, my son's was down, and everybody else was having to do passwords. So I don't know what was going on, but
well, they had while we were talking, I got a news alert on my watch, because that's where I get them, and they put on the news that it was there was an outage. So they clearly have figured out what the problem was. So that's good, because when I saw the comments start popping up, I was like, oh, we must be back on.
Yeah. So I'll check that out on our Facebook pages to make sure we have the whole podcast. If not, I'll put the YouTube on there so everybody can see it. That was good to have Kara on today and kind of hear her story and the things she's involved in, because you and I are both very involved with the Air Power Council and the Air Power Foundation and Holidays and Heroes. And it's nice to have other people that are involved in there on our program. I think pretty soon Scott Palomero, he's going to be on. I talked to him the other day, and he's
Scott
a powerhouse. Yeah.
He's out there. He was there. He's still there, so he does good work out there at the Airmen and Family Readiness Center. Yeah.
So he did a good job the other day. That was a tremendous job he did. So we have roll call this week. I mean, not this week, but the 26th.
22nd.
22nd. Okay.
March 22nd. The RSVP link opened yesterday. I think that's what you're thinking about. But the RSVP yesterday, and I got on there an hour after it opened, and there was already 111 RSVPs. My guess is that if I get on there, or when I get on there here in just a little bit, we'll be well over 300. We have a limit, so if you're gonna come to the luncheon, you got to get in there now. And always remember, no matter if you are a roll call member or not, you're always guest number one. And then if you're bringing anybody else with you, then they're 2, 3, whatever, however many you're bringing with you. So that's kind of what folks struggle with sometimes. And you can get to that link by just going to our Facebook page at roll-call.org. And you can click the little RSVP link right there on the mission statement and enter your information and ready to go.
That's good. And it's the hottest ticket in town. So you better make your reservations real soon. Like today would be a good day to make them.
Yeah, absolutely. This week for sure. By the end of the week, we'll be real close to full.
And, you know, one thing, if you don't have reservations and you show up, you have to wait until a certain time to get in. And I just encourage people that do come to roll call that aren't veterans, but just supporters, to kind of let the veterans sit up front. You know, I've noticed a lot of times the front end's all packed with supporters and the veterans are in the back. So I'd like to see some of them move back a little bit so our veterans can be closer. So
absolutely agree.
This Thursday is 50th anniversary of my wife Susan joining the Army. We got married right out of high school. I got drafted, and then about a year and a half later, she went in. So happy 50th anniversary on being a United States Army soldier to Susan. March the 29th is Vietnam Veterans Day. So be sure to wish any Vietnam veterans happy Vietnam Veterans Day for that.
Yeah, and there's you can go out to the museum in Mineral Wells. They're going to be having a lot of stuff going on that day out there. And, you know, that's specifically Vietnam Museum. So I would encourage folks to make sure to get out there and see what all is going on out there that day. And then I think they're doing something big in Burleson. We can probably get all the details on the 30th. We're going to have the trailer out there. Roy will be out there setting up. And I think they're going to be doing some pinnings out there. So they'll be doing pinnings just about everywhere about the 29th and 30th. So anybody that's a Vietnam era veteran that has not yet been pinned, and Vietnam era meaning that you served during that era, not necessarily in country, but if you still have not gotten pinned and you would like to do so, there will be ample opportunities all over in, you know, many places that day, but specifically the 29th to have that happen.
So there's a lot of things going on. I know that next month we have the Blue Angels coming in at NASJRB. I think this is the 13th and 14th of April for the big air show. This is the first air show that we've had there in several years because they've had the other air shows up at Alliance, but it's moved back to NASJRB. And I know the new skipper probably has his hands full with that.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. Yes. And it's also Navy Fleet Week. So we're going to have a group in here. Rick and I have been working this for, I know I started working it probably about November, and I pulled Rick in and we started talking about it, figuring out how we're going to do this. And so they're bringing in a group from out of state that is, you know, the high performing sailors, and they're bringing them in for Fleet Week to talk a lot about the Navy and what they do. And, you know, of course, we know a little bit about you because we have a Naval Air Station Joint Reserve Base here. But we'll be doing some activities with them, and we've also been able to hook them up with some other folks to get involved. But we'll be doing the war stories on April 11th. We'll be putting that flyer out and that information out here any day now. And there will be 100 tickets available for folks that would like to come and hear some war stories. We're going to have 4 to 5 veterans that will be sitting on a panel telling stories that will include dinner, and it'll be $20 at the Haltom City American Legion. And that really just covers taking care of the food. It's not a fundraiser or anything. It's just we're taking care of the cost for the event at $20 a head. So be on the lookout for that, and that'll be real neat. Rick and I'll have a couple of the guys that are from this area, not stationed here, but from here. We'll have them on a podcast that week. So we'll have a lot of fun stuff going on, and then the luncheon will be on base in April. On April 20th.
It will be. We've got a confirmation, huh?
Got a confirmation.
That's the skipper will have his hands full with the air show and then having the biggest gathering of people for the luncheon.
Right.
So he'll get well broken into to Fort Worth and the roll call.
That's for sure.
Yeah, you talk about the war stories that we're going to have, that dinner and everything. You know, things like that. We have a very generous family that's donated for that, and we just appreciate them so much. Also, Freedom Mobility Foundation, Major General Pottinger and Ann, his wife, they're involved in this too. So it's going to be a good night. I'm looking forward to it. So a lot of things going on. There's the roll call in April will be April the 26th, I think.
Right.
And also that's the R. Lee Ermey Memorial Classic. Chuck Wright puts on a great, a lot of jarheads out there, a lot of Marines playing golf out there. Sometimes you'll have the commandant or the ex-commandant and, you know, other people out there playing. Don's usually out there. He's not playing golf. He's just riding around on the cart. But a lot of things coming up. So I hope that everybody was able to get on Facebook and watch today's program. We'll make it available too on YouTube. So we just appreciate all the people that view us every week and for your support. And we look forward to seeing you again next week. And we'll have another great guest. And Kara, just thank you so much for being on today. And thank you for those organizations that do so much for our community and our veterans community. This is